Invest Africa, proudly brought to you by KPMG.
And welcome to the special broadcast of Invest Africa. I am Nozipho Mbandra. Today we're on location. We're sitting down with some powerful women, not only on the African context, but globally. And the topic that we're taking on this afternoon is investing in women. To help me unpack some of the issues relating to investing in women and what the opportunities and the pitfalls are of doing that, I have with me the co-author of a recently released book. The book is titled Women on Board. Nancy Calderon is with me. She is a global lead partner at KPMG. We also have the chairperson of the South African chapter of Women Corporate Directors, and that's Tshidi Mokgabudi. Thank you so much for making the time to join us. For you at home, if you want to be a part of this conversation, you can certainly do that. That's by following me on Twitter at The Real Nosy or at CNBC Africa. Ladies, thank you so much for making the time to join us. Nancy, let's start off with the book. Catchy title, Women on Board, no doubt a play on corporate governance and the role that women can play in that regard. Why, firstly, put this book out, and what's the message you're trying to get through to women?
Well, I think Susan and I wrote the book intentionally. As the world is now changing, we're starting to see quotas, and around the world more women are getting on boards, or more boards are starting to look at women as potential board candidates. There's been some terrific studies recently in the last 10 years that have shown that boards that have 3 or more women have increased their profitability, ROI, many different factors that are improving with that. But what we found is there hasn't been enough experienced women that have come up through the ranks to fit the criteria or understand what happens in the board. So we took it and said, let's separate the book into different chapters, talk about how do you go through your interview, how do you lead an audit committee, all the way to the last section is about how to be a visionary board member, drive your companies to be even higher heights.
So we'll certainly get into some of those skills that women can latch onto in terms of making sure that they're effective members on the boards that they sit on. But Tshidi, you are the chairperson of Women Corporate Directors. Nancy's here in South Africa. Talk to us a little bit about the significance of today's gathering and what are the key issues that the organization has put on the table.
Yes, Nozipho. I think first of all, it's very important to touch on what Nancy has said in terms of why we set up the WCD SA chapter. You know, the markets are changing, the companies are becoming very global, and the whole world is evolving. So therefore, we felt that as South Africans, we do not only have to have a governance body that is South Africa based, but we needed also to have a governance body that has a global vision. Right. So it was very important for us to have an SA chapter which is connected to the global WCD.
What about
for
the
global
environment then?
expansions.
And I want us to get that global and South African context coming through. And maybe Tshidi, start off with giving a sense of, do we have an understanding of the growth of women in corporate South Africa at a board level? Nancy spoke about it improving, but at a slow pace. What are the figures that are relevant for the South African context?
Yes, the figures are being reorganized right now, so I wouldn't want to talk about the figures whilst they are being audited. But the progress that we have seen since we have started focusing on women and women in business and women in corporate boards and so on, we are seeing a pace of women getting into boards. It is slow. They are still in the minority, but that pace has increased a bit. There is a recognition that we need more women on board. And in fact, the recognition is because of diversity. They bring in diversity of thought and diversity of knowledge. So there is that mindset change as well. It's no longer about the numbers game,
Right.
but it's what they bring.
And I'm going to obviously challenge you on that, because I think there are two schools of thought. And the one is that there's real value that can be unlocked from women sitting on boards. And Nancy, I do want you to talk about that. But in South Africa, we're also in a transformative process. And we've also heard of women being appointed for window dressing purposes, and it being reduced to a numbers game. But before we get to that contentious issue, let's talk about that value. Sitting on a board, why should I be rallying to have more women as my counterparts around the table?
Well, I think it's diversity in general. So how do we bring in different experiences, different global experiences, whatever our executive experiences have been? All of those add to the richness of any board. I think when you look at the difference between male and female, automatically there is a difference, and we'll be able to bring in some additional thoughts. And it just lends to a better conversation, arguably a better strategy for the company.
And are we turning the corner then, Tshidi, when it comes to ensuring that we're moving away from the numbers game and moving towards unlocking the value that we're speaking about?
That's exactly why WCD, we are challenging the numbers game. And in fact, that is why we had this boot camp, new directors boot camp today, to actually say that continuous learning is important. Experiential learning is very important. So today, for instance, when I say experiential learning, we had the experienced board members sitting on panel, role-playing what they do on the boards when they are on the boards. So we actually made it very practical. And what does that do? The women who are coming onto the boards, they learn from the panels of today. They are actually not going to do the mistakes that would have been done by the ones that are already on the boards. And by so doing, you are already changing the mindset that, hey, these are not numbers. These are board members who are adding value in the board.
I think even to the numbers, though, if you look at WCD right now has over 3,500 members sitting on over 5,000 boards. We did a study last year that looked at the cap value of all the public boards, and it was $8 trillion. I mean, so we have women out there with the experience serving on boards and really making a difference. So you had made an earlier comment about, well, we're just going to bring somebody on. I think there is, depending on which country you're in, comments about there's not enough experienced women, right, which is not really the case. If you look at the countries that have actually passed quotas, they've been able to find their executives, bring them out, and perhaps it takes a training class, right, to say, here's what really happens in the audit committee. But I don't think there is a lack of executive women that can easily a transition to a board.
I'm really excited by the phraseology that you use. You talk about a boot camp. And I want to know what's in the boot camp package. In essence, what's being shared as the non-negotiable skills that you've got to have if you're going to be an effective board member. And maybe Tshidi, take it on first, and Nancy, no doubt you'll add to it.
Yeah. I think the very first thing that was fascinating about this boot camp today was that to succeed as a board member, it doesn't start with your first board. It starts before the first board. It starts with your own board biography. You start building it up before even the first board. It starts with the board interview. You will have the board members interviewing you for a board seat. And at that time, behave as if you are already in the board. So your first board is not starting on the day you are invited, but it starts with your own board preparation.
So you almost have to have board presence before you're on the board to come across as board material.
Absolutely, absolutely.
But don't you think one of the best requirements or experiences that you could have is you've presented to a board?
Right.
By seeing it, and whether or not you're on a not-for-profit board or you're presenting to your own company's board, you understand how it works. And it is important to understand the governance, but just physically have been in one of those meetings gives you the
Nancy,
confidence.
another skill. I mean, I really appreciate what you're saying about having that executive board presence. What's another skill that they're walking away with after today's boot camp?
Oh, I think, well, hopefully they would have the courage to realize that their experiences can change and go onto a board. I think we had a good discussion around the different committees. So if you're a finance person, a CFO, certainly going to a board that's in need of somebody on their audit committee, you are better positioned to do that. I think an awareness in the boot camp is, what does the audit committee do? And perhaps there are positions that are available to you that you perhaps hadn't thought it.
Is there power play at the committee level where women by default would gravitate towards certain committees versus others? What's your take on that?
There is definitely that power play, whereby they were actually sharing it in some of the forums that we have, that there's an assumption that as a woman you probably need to be in the social and ethics committee vis-a-vis the audit and risk committee.
Yes.
Right,
there is that, and we're breaking that because I mean, in line with the pipeline of the women coming into your finance profession, your risk profession, there's lots of women in that space. So we are saying to women, raise your hand and say, no, I would like to be in this committee, which is audit and risk, not necessarily finding all women in social and ethical committee. But also I just want to make another point. You know, that mindset also has to change in the sense that social and ethical committee is a very important committee. Yeah. So we must break that mindset of saying it's a second in-line type of committee.
Nancy, let's get your comment before we go to break.
Yeah, I was just going to say the other thing we were talking about is whatever committee you're on, you should not only limit yourself to contributing to the board for that, and particularly around strategy. I think we had a robust discussion around strategy and new things that people should be thinking about, all driven by women that were sitting on audit committees and risk committees and other committees that you thought would have pigeonholed them, but truly they have a big voice as part of strategy.
We're breaking down the barriers and we're talking about effective women on effective boards. And this, of course, is part of a broader conversation of investing in women in Africa. Let's take a short break. When we come back, we continue this robust discussion. Welcome back. You're still watching Invest Africa. We're taking on the topic of investing in women, and we're particularly focusing on women at the corporate board level. The conversations thus far have been robust, they've been difficult, but they've also been exciting. And helping me to unpack them are my two guests who are still here with me. Tshidi Mokgabudi, she is the chairperson of the South African chapter of Women Corporate Directors, and Nancy Calderon, she's a global lead partner with KPMG and the co-author of recently released book, Women on Board. Thank you again for being here. And Nancy, let's start off again with reference back to the book. No doubt your audience is younger women who aspire to be at a board level. The key messaging that you're wanting them to walk away with?
Well, I think one of the reasons we wrote it was also to get young executives, or not even executives yet. I think we learned through many experiences that if you start early enough and start asking for particular experiences, you'll then have your board bio that you need to go forward. But what's probably as equally exciting right now is opportunities for young women with new experiences. And I like to use the term CAMS, which is cloud, analytics, mobile, social, and security. All of those are brand new issues that our existing board members generally are not experts in. So we're looking to younger people to come in, and I think the book lays out, here's the experiences you can get, here's how you would meet people, here's the things you could do to advance it.
Do young potential board members, young execs, know how to sell those skills? Do they know how to position themselves, saying, I can fill that gap that you have right now?
No, I think that's the reason why we wrote it, and we're finding that the people that are attending these boot camps are younger and younger. So when at first they were maybe in the sweet spot of new board members is probably average in the world maybe mid-50s. And now all of a sudden we're having women in their mid-30s coming along and saying, what is this? How can I learn more about it? And how can I use my top years of 40 to 50 and really pulling together the right experiences?
That's fantastic. And one of the issues, of course, Tshidi, that we spoke about earlier was lifelong learning. The significance of lifelong learning first. But importantly, are women, choosing the right paths for lifelong learning? Are we studying the right things? Do we know the skill that's going to get us into the boxing ring so that we have a fighting chance?
The whole world is changing. It is evolving. So when we talk about lifelong learning, it's very important that you keep track of what is happening around you. What is happening in the world? What are the trends? That is what is going to inform you. What are these lifelong learning? I want us to keep away also of thinking that the learnings of the past, as far as boards are concerned, are the learnings that we should learn today. The world is changing. Somebody was sharing with me that since 2007, it has changed. Even it's changing at a faster pace.
Right.
So lifelong learning is a continuous process. Some of the experienced board members today, they were actually saying, we're calling this a new director's boot camp, but I am learning as an experienced director. So you never stop learning because the world is evolving. Very important.
And I thought that your question about do the young women understand what their educational requirements are to be on these boards, us as board members need to figure that out. Right. We now are dealing with millennial issues, and even younger than millennials are so different because they've been raised on technology, what they're going to enter into the world and expect, and what their college is going to be or university is going to be. It's arguably not going to be good enough, or it's going to be the wrong skills.
Yeah. And also lifelong learning is a two-way process as well, precisely for these type of reasons. That notion of saying that experienced directors are the ones who know what happens in the board. Equally, the young people, because of these generational changes and the evolving world, they have something to share with the experienced directors.
But we always come back to the notion of mentorship, especially when we're talking about women in the corporate space. Is it a figment of our imaginations, or is this really happening that women are saying, let's cross-fertilize each other in terms of the knowledge sharing? Nancy, let's pick up on that. Is this a real trend, or is it a nice to talk about?
No, I think it's really important, but I think it's really important that the men are getting involved in it as well. I think we figured out that having women mentors has helped us, and now what we need to do is we need the CEOs and fellow board members to start mentoring particular female potential members and help them get down and meet the people that they need to meet.
And of course, there's always the element of networks as well, and whether women have figured out how to embed themselves in the most effective networks. How important is that if you want to be effective on a board?
Yes, we spoke about the networks actually today. That was our closing note, that networks are very important. Pick up the what Nancy called the inside secrets. You pick them up from the networking. So it's important that your mindset also, when we are on the topic of the boards, when you are networking and networking around board people, think about whatever inside secrets that could be coming out of that social interaction and social conversation. Very important to network.
Yes, Nancy.
Oh, I was going to say for networking, I think there's statistics out there that say 20% of board positions are coming through search firms. The rest are networking. So if women are not taking the time to do it, and arguably I talked about an example of a woman I met last week, took her a year and a half, and she did one event a week with the intention of meeting somebody who was on boards or to learn about an industry. So it is not I know one person, it is a community of people that you really need to get to know.
And you actually get to your second board by networking. You do great in your first board, and then thereafter the chairman recognizes your greatness in this board.
And what happens? Becomes your bridge to the next, and before you know it, you have a portfolio. Now, one of the things that I do want to talk about, especially for women who already are on boards, the not-to-dos, the pitfalls, the red flags, the things that you should stay away from if you want to build those bridges onto the next board and onto the next board? One or two from each. Nancy, let me start off with you.
Well, I think the first one is to be collaborative. How are you part of a board? How are you able to listen to everyone and not take it being your only position? You are there for the good of that company,
right,
and for the good of the shareholders.
I think very important also that you don't come in the board with an attacking attitude. Boards can be very dynamic and very difficult to manage. So very important that at that time, you retain your authenticity, you retain your calmness, you retain your firmness though, without being attacking to whoever that you want to attack. Continue dealing with the facts and not with the people.
I think in the man's world they say play the ball and not the man.
Yes.
Something along those lines.
Yes,
right.
yes.
I want us to go back as we begin to wrap up this conversation to this old age question that we're always bringing up when we're having conversations about progression in women, and that's this pursuit of balance. And whether that takes on a different nature when you're playing at the board level. Nancy?
Well, I think, and as a mother of a teenager, so I definitely deal with work-life balances, I do believe we need to figure out what we love to do and what we're passionate about. To be on the board, you have to be passionate about that company, the industry, because it's going to take a lot of your, I always call it my thinking time. When I'm reading newspapers or magazines or anything else I'm researching, I focus on the board. So in that regard, you do limit it. I think with all work-life balance issues, you really do have to choose, maybe not for years, but for today or for a month, and you can then better balance, I think.
I think Nancy touched on passion. Very important that when you get into boards that you have passion with, in the industries that you are passionate about. When you do that, that actually help you with the balance, because you are passionate here, and when you finish there, you are able to move to your next life, which is your family. Yeah, so passion for me is very important in terms of dealing with
So you must have
balance.
that alignment so that you are able to navigate those worlds almost simultaneously. The importance of changing the mindset of men, because we can never really talk about real breakthroughs for women and total transformation if the second half of the equation is not on board with the mindset shift. Are we winning on that front?
I think it's moving. I mean, I think the biggest movements have been in Europe and India, who have passed some legislation to increase the number of women on boards. I think there are some countries that have spoken about it, and the UK is one, thought about doing it and didn't, but just by having that discussion, the companies actually stopped and decided to take a look at it and have improved, and there are more women on boards. But I think it's crucial that men are involved, engaged, and get to know the women, you know, reverse networking. How do they make sure that they're comfortable with us on the boards?
How do we get men to be comfortable with us on the boards? Your take on this one?
I think very important to stay as a woman. Do not, your first role is stay as a woman. One thing that I've found, I suppose with me as well, when I started being a board member, you know, the first boards, you want to play the part of the men, you know. Once you do that, you are obviously not going to do the best of it because you are not a man. So very important for me that you stay as a woman, and the minute you do that, stay as a woman, stay authentic on that board, they start seeing you as a contributor to the board.
Well, on that note, standing firm, staying as a woman, staying authentic, and that's the way you can raise your profile as an effective board member. Very big thank you to my guest, that's Tshidi Mokgabudi. She is the chairperson of the South African chapter of Women Corporate Directors, and of course, Nancy Calderon, who's joined us. She is a global lead partner with KPMG. Exciting conversations indeed. Let's keep this conversation alive, and that's by taking it onto Twitter. Follow me at The Real Nosy or at CNBC Africa. The hashtag for this show is Invest Africa. Thank you for joining us.